Welcome to Galaxy Tenants UFO Chronicles Part 2. Today we feature a handful of stories surrounding UFO sightings as well as an alien encounter, and we feature a couple of songs courtesy of Trad Plus titled Marching on Mars and A Day Under the Sun.
I am Pam McCann. I live in Vermont now. I lived in New Hampshire for a good portion of my life, so I consider myself from New Hampshire, but happy to be a Vermonter now. So back in 1986, dialing back a ways, I was traveling into a geographical phenomenon in New Hampshire known as Franconia Notch, which is in the northern part of the state. And Franconia is a small town there. Franconia Notch is famous for Cannon Mountain, where skier Bodie Miller came from, and I know the Millers well. It's kind of a tight community. So anyway, way back then, my brother and my two then little sisters and I were traveling down to meet up with my mother to do some swimming at a place in Franconia. It was the evening, and they were swimming at a resort, so we were headed down there. And on our way down, my brother was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and my two little sisters were in the back. And it was a beautiful, clear night, and we were getting ready to sort of at the mouth of the notch, heading in. And I was looking up at the sky and at the stars, and then something that seemed to be a star kind of came into view, although it was just sort of spinning and kind of I don't know how to explain it, but it was turning different colors. Okay, it was like red, orange, blue, green, whatever. And I said to my brother, who is pretty hip to the sky and constellations and planets and stars and where the placement is, and Doug, what is that? Do you recognize is that a planet? What is that? He didn't know, and I didn't know, of course. And then it just sort of started kind of splaying out like arms or rays, sort of very, very star shaped, and getting larger and still changing color and getting bigger and bigger. And we slowed down the car, sort of pulled off to the side of the road, and we did pull off to a stop. And suddenly, this thing was right above us, but it was no longer looking like what it had in the sky. It was actually triangular. It was, I guess almost as big as a football field. It seemed like it was quite closely above us. I can't really tell how high up it was. It had like there was detail. There were lights on each corner, and it seemed to be black. I couldn't tell any color in between where the lights were. And then there was sort of this hanging round glass dome in the middle. And we were still in the car, and there was a sunroof. So I'm looking out of the sunroof, and I couldn't believe it. I was seeing my brother. It was crazy. So I got out of the car. Because I have interest in these things anyway, phenomena. I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a look. This is just crazy. I got out of the car and I looked up, and this thing was there. And it was, I didn't think of it until later, but it was completely soundless. And then I don't even know how long we were there looking at it, but my sister started freaking out in the car and kind of screaming and telling me to get back in the car, get back in the car. I don't remember my brother telling me to get back in the car. He was just kind of stunned and looking up himself. I didn't get back in the car. I was just looking up in awe, and I was saying, it's okay, and then as quickly as it had come down, it took off and vanished, and it was gone. And that was that. And then some years later, I was watching one of those, those programs started to be on TV, and somebody was describing the same thing, and I called my brother up and I said, that's the thing we saw. I'm looking at it right now. I can't even remember the name of the program, but one of those UFO programs.
Mm-hmm. Did you get the impression that it was military, or if it was otherworldly, or what was the feeling that you got from it?
Well, it certainly felt far beyond any technology that should exist. I can't really say whether I think it was from, another planet, like specifically, but definitely technologically, if it were from here, it was borrowing from somewhere else that was either from the outer reaches or from a different dimension even, because it was not possible for that thing to do what it did. And that's that. So maybe it was a technology that was being messed with that, is actually something that, humans are doing that, we don't know about, and we don't know about anything anyway. So there's so much going on, So I don't really chalk it up to, yes, it was aliens, it was this, but hey, I don't discount that either, because I don't disbelieve that. All I know is that is exactly what happened, and I wasn't alone, and I was, and I was with my brother, who was completely logical, and even to this day, he's like, yeah, okay, that, we check in every once in a while. Like, remember that?
Hello, this is Jeremy Garrett, and I wanted to tell you my story about, a UFO encounter, a true unidentified flying object. First of all, I guess I should give you a little bit of background. I'm a musician, and I play with a band called the Infamous String Dusters, and I've toured pretty much all my entire life. I started playing music when I was 3 years old, and headed up and down the road in my teens, and been all over the country, been all over other countries around the world. And, I've traveled so many miles and watched all the evidence on UFOs and stuff that I come across, as anybody would in their daily lives, I guess on TV or whatever, all speculation and probably fake. And never believed in any of that kind of stuff, and until it happens and you see something, and you have to at least ask the question, what is it? So that kind of sets the stage, I guess, for a night, I guess, a few years ago now, in middle of summertime, about this time of year, in Montana. I went up there to do a fly fishing camp / music camp. And part of the deal was I would go as a teacher to teach this music camp, and get some fly fishing on the side during the day, and in exchange for my teaching, and in some of the most pristine trout waters that you can possibly imagine on a huge 40,000 acre ranch in the middle of nowhere, Montana. This particular camp was a beautiful zone, gorgeous little ranch-style house with a kitchen and, teaching accommodations for everyone that were going and attending the camp, except for me and one other instructor by the name of John Lowell. And we were staying off-site at another house down the road, I guess maybe 2 miles down the road, that used to be an old post office, and they actually converted it into a bedroom or whatever for whatever reasons they had. But for us, it was where we stayed during the camp. So anyways, we would teach all day and fish, and then we'd have some dinner at night, and maybe have a little concert or something. And so me and John actually did a concert together one evening during all this. And at the end of it all, it was around 12 or 12:30, I guess, by the time we decided to take off and head towards that other house. And John was driving, and we were in a pickup truck. We pull out, and it was a windy road down to a main sort of dirt road. And then that dirt road, you would hang a right and head about another 1.5 miles on down to the place. So as we left the ranch house, coming out of there and coming down a windy hill, we're talking just about the day and how everything went so well and was fun and everything. And all of a sudden, we look up, and I see this light in the sky. And I'll tell you more about the description of it. But, it's like one of those things that you see when it doesn't really register that you see it. It's like it plays a trick on your mind, like you almost don't notice it. It's so unusual. But then after I saw the light, I had to ask, and I just exclaimed out loud. I was like, "Hey, John, what is that?" and looking up in the sky, and he turned to me and he goes, well, I don't know what that is. And we just both started looking at this thing, and I couldn't help but ask again. I was like, what in the world is that thing? And he said, I don't know what that is. So to describe what I saw to you, basically, as we were coming down the hill, I looked into the sky and saw a giant rectangle. Now, I kind of knew the size of it because I looked down the hill and there was a sort of a mountain down the road with timber sticking out on top of it. And you know about how big the timber is. And this thing was massive in the sky, and it was behind that mountain with the timber on the top of it. And it was so big you could see it plainly. It was like a big giant rectangle with a tiny little dome on top. And it even had some things that sort of looked like columns in between on the rectangle, flowing from sort of up and down. And there wasn't any movement. There wasn't anything like where it flew in or anything like that. It was just there. And we were, stood in the road in the truck looking at it in awe. And we looked at it for about 35 seconds, and I did consider taking a cell phone video of it, but, it's one of those things, you're going to take a picture of it, and it's not going to turn out, and now I really kick myself for not, just at least taking a picture or doing something. But, we were just in awe. It just totally took us by surprise. We watched it for about 35 seconds, and then all of a sudden, it was gone. It didn't fly away. The lights didn't turn off and it got dark. It was just literally gone. And it was probably the most crazy thing I've ever seen up to this moment. And, I've seen it all. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff out there in my line of work and, traveling around the country and the world and doing what we do. But I've never seen anything like that. And I was on the internet the next day for a couple of hours to research if I could find anything that looked like it. There was nothing, of course. And then later down the road, I got with a science friend that actually works for the people that are designing the James Webb telescope right now. And we took a tour of the facility, and I got to asking him, and I told him about my experience. And I was like, look, I see all the satellites that NASA and even, all of our country and the military and all this kind of stuff have going around. It would be hard for anything to get in here without something noticing it. So I asked him what his opinion or theory might have been, and he had a pretty logical explanation. He said that maybe it was possible that we were so far north up in Montana there that we somehow saw a skim of a reflection of something that skimmed off of the atmosphere, and we were seeing a light that wasn't really there, and we were just at the right angle. And that's a plausible explanation. And, we weren't that far from an abandoned military base. It could have been something like that. So I'm not necessarily one to buy into that I saw an alien or alien spacecraft. But there was somebody else there that is a very, good character person and somebody who doesn't exaggerate, and a good source to have along as a buddy to make sure, hey, am I seeing what I'm seeing? And we sure did. In fact, we went back to the ranch house after the thing disappeared, and we both went into separate rooms and drew a picture of what we saw, came back to the middle, and they were the same pictures. So we knew what we were seeing, and it was definitely a special experience.
The next story comes from Ben Wright of the Henhouse Prowlers.
Okay, I want to start this off by saying it's absolutely true. Happened a long time ago, but it definitely happened. After I failed out of college, I moved back home and got a job in Ithaca, New York, working for a company that distributed produce and other really nice goods to restaurants around the city. And myself and this other guy would get in a truck and drive all over Ithaca and the surrounding area. And it was a hard job, good job. And, you know, when you do this with somebody else, you get to know them. And after a few weeks, the guy I drove with and I became good buds. He was a few years older than me, nice guy. And one day we were kind of out in the woods outside of Ithaca delivering to a restaurant way out there. And he said, "Hey, my grandfather's farm's out here. We should stop there. I want to show you something." And I was like, "Sure." So we stopped at this old farm, nice farmhouse with a big kind of fading red barn. And we stopped next to the barn, and he got out and slid the big barn door open and pulled me in there. And we walked into this kind of classic Americana barn and wove through the old stalls that no longer had cows in them and got to the back of the barn. And there was this huge thing with a big tarp over it. And I was just like, what's he showing me? Some kind of old antique, I don't know. And he grabbed this tarp and pulled it off, and there, right in front of me, was this huge disc-shaped UFO. It was a UFO right there in front of me, and I was just kind of flabbergasted, and he laughed. And, you know, after my first view of it, I looked a little closer and recognized pretty immediately it was handmade. Lots of gathered metal. There were lights on it. It didn't have any markings or anything, but it was so clearly made with a welding torch and, scrap metal gathered up to make a pretty cool looking UFO. Like, in the 1950s style, total disc with a bulge at the top and these kind of lights around it that may or may not have flashed. And I was like, what's the story behind this thing? And he's like, wow. My grandfather in 1960 had this neighbor who was always doing property disputes, like claiming that he was farming on this guy's property and he was bringing out lawyers and trying to check property lines, and this guy just wouldn't let up and drove him nuts. And he said my grandfather was a pretty smart guy who was handy with tools, and he got this crazy idea in his head and he built this UFO. And knew when this guy would go into town at night a couple times a week. And one day he dragged this makeshift UFO out into a field right by where this guy drove and had it hooked up to a battery. And when the guy started driving by, he flipped the switch and this thing just lit up. And he said the car stopped and he was too far away to see, but it was clear the guy saw it, and it's probably safe to assume he was freaking out. After about 30 seconds, the car sped off, and he turned off the UFO, dragged it back to the barn, put the tarp on it, and that was the end of the use of this crazy thing. And sure enough, the guy had gone into town and explained to everybody he'd seen this UFO, and, for pretty much forever, everybody kind of quietly assumed this guy was crazy.
So I am Keka. I grew up in Michigan, but I'm Mexican, so I spent a lot of time in Mexico too. So going back and forth between Michigan and Mexico was kind of the norm for me. When I was about 10 years old, my dad got a job offer in Arizona that he thought, he's a computer graphics artist, and he thought it would be something that could help him move up the ranks a little bit. So we moved to Arizona about a little bit before Thanksgiving break, I believe. So I was in the middle of 4th grade going to a brand new school, and we rented this tiny little apartment was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment for my parents and my 2 other siblings and myself. So, I mean, it fit us, but it was tiny, and it was a new place. It was scary. Didn't see anything weird right away moving in, but I want to say it's hard to tell because I was 10 years old, and you don't really know time very well back when you're young. But I want to say it was a few weeks in. My sister and I were sharing a room, and my brother was sleeping in my parents' room because he's the youngest. And I'm trying to fall asleep when all of a sudden I feel like something is underneath my bed punching my mattress. And that was absolutely terrifying. I had no idea what to do. I didn't call out for my parents. I just kind of didn't believe it was happening because we had pets, we had cats, but typically they weren't in our bedroom, and it felt like fists punching the bottom of my mattress, So I just kind of dealt with it for a little bit. Eventually I got really, really scared, and it was a tiny little bedroom. So I was able to jump from my bed to my sister's bed pretty easily, even though both beds were on either side of the wall. So I jumped from my bed to her bed, and I said, "There's something under my bed punching me." And she's my younger sister, but she's always been the calm, wise one. She said, "No, it's not. Just go to sleep." So we cuddled together, And from that day on, every single night, something punched the bottom of my bed. During the day, from a distance, I would try to look underneath my bed and just see if there was anything there. I never saw anything. I was absolutely terrified to have my feet anywhere near the bottom of my bed or look under there at night, So I don't know why, but I didn't tell my parents at all, but I did keep jumping over to my sister's bed. And one night I'm in my sister's bed, and my sister shakes me awake, and she goes, "I feel it. I feel the punching." And I could feel it too, but it was definitely more on her side of the mattress. So, that validated for me that this was real. I think there was a big part of me that thought this was not real, that, I don't know, I was just having a muscle spasm or something, that I was making up a story in my head. I don't know. But so that validated it for me. And it was a little scary knowing that it was real, but I got used to it. I want to say 2 months of this total. So we had Christmas, my birthday's in January. So, it was about 2 months of just kind of getting punched every night through the mattress, and it was weird. But I got used to it. I learned how to sleep through it. The scariest part to me was when it stopped, because there was one night where I'm laying there and I'm just trying to fall asleep, and I'm getting punched in my back like usual, and it just stops. And I had this moment of, oh shit, what's about to happen? Because something different is happening right now, And so I was just laying there, and it was dark. We didn't have a nightlight or anything like that. But I looked over to my left because the right side of the bed was against the wall. So I look over to my left to the edge of my bed, and what looks like a face about the size of my fist, about the size of like a cat's head, right? Just kind of slowly comes up over the edge of the bed and just stares at me. I didn't move. I mean, I kind of did this weird, I remember experiencing like a lot of tension in my stomach because I was doing this really weird like sit up, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Like, is this my cat? What is happening? Right? So, but I can't move because I'm just absolutely terrified. So it just stares at me for a few minutes. Then it turns around and it starts walking away. And this is when I realize it is walking on 2 legs. It's definitely not walking on all 4s. This isn't a cat that just happened to be on its hind legs or something like that. I can kind of see its body shape. It looks like a toddler, honestly. Like, it's so small. It's about the height of like a 2-year-old, but it's very thin. It doesn't have the same like waist size that you would expect a toddler to have, right? From what I can tell, it was pretty hairless. I don't remember seeing any ears. I remember, when I think about it in my head, I remember the ears being like really flat to the head. And the nose was there, but it didn't protrude like ours. Lips were really thin, that kind of stuff. So it starts walking away, and then it just kind of gets to my door it had these really long arms. So even though it was like toddler size, these arms were like dragging on the floor, the hands were. And it reaches up for the doorknob, turns to look at me, just looks at me for a little bit, opens the door and walks out.
When you were feeling the pounding on the bottom of the bed, what was the sense of what was under there to you? What did you feel like that could have been?
I went through a lot of different things of what it could have been. After about a week of it happening, I didn't think it was malicious in any way. It felt like it was just part of what I lived with now, you know. I went through a lot of things in my mind of it being the cats, and I just don't realize that they're in my bedroom, of it being, again, muscle spasms. You know, I used to do a lot of ballet at that age, so I knew what it felt like to get like a muscle cramp and stuff like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just, I tried to find logical reasons.
Sure. So a lot of people write off experiences like that as trauma, but with it being a shared experience that your sister also experienced this, kind of rules that out. And have you talked to your sister at all about it? And does she have a feeling of what you guys could have experienced?
So I didn't tell her about seeing this creature until I was probably in my 20s. She's only 2 years younger than me, so I must have been 26, so she was about 24. We were just kind of sitting in my living room one day, and I asked her, hey, do you remember when we lived in Arizona? And we only lived in Arizona for a year. We ended up moving back because the job wasn't as great as my dad thought it was going to be. But remember when we were living in Arizona and I used to jump to your bed because something was always punching me? And she goes, yeah, I remember that. I remember feeling the punches. I asked her, did I ever tell you what that was? Like I actually think it was an alien living in our bedroom. And she said, no, I didn't realize that. So I told her the story of seeing this creature come out from underneath my bed and everything. And I just kind of told her, I haven't really told anyone because I feel a little crazy having experienced this, you know. But she said, no, I remember this. It was real. She says she never saw the creature like I did, but she remembers feeling the punches underneath the mattress when I would jump over to her bed.
Mm-hmm. Without being specific, can you talk about, just briefly touch on maybe what you do professionally and why you would want to remain anonymous in this scenario? And again, just no specifics. Sure.
Yeah. I'm a psychologist. So I see people on a daily basis and I'm helping them with their mental health concerns. Yeah. So that's the main reason that I want to stay anonymous.
Sure. The reason I guess I wanted you to say what it is you did is because it kind of lends even more credibility to your understanding of experiences and what people go through, and kind of even gives more credibility to your story, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I like to think of myself as a pretty mentally stable individual.
think, things are bound to somewhat leak out. I don't know if we'll ever really, really know, because they keep the stuff really tight. But I'm a firm believer that they have things in possession and probably are doing reverse engineering and probably are messing with time and, all sorts of those things. I don't discount any of that. I mean, we're here. Our presence at all and what we experience and look at makes anything possible.
I know what I saw, and I never saw anything like it in any kind of movie or fantasy or book or anything like that. So it was a powerful experience and one that sticks with me to this day.
Honestly, more and more. So I questioned myself for a very long time. But now, as I've been telling the story more, as I have been validated by my sister, by my spouse, by our mutual friend, all of that, I stand firm in that this was an alien from outer space.
Thank you for listening to Galaxy Tenants. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. For early access to episodes and exclusive content, check us out on Patreon. Also, if you'd like to communicate with us, send an email to galaxytenants@gmail.com or leave a voicemail on the Galaxy Tenants hotline at 303-550-2065.
You've reached the Galaxy Tenants hotline. Please leave a message.